Hello, everyone. This is the Project Review Committee. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, project review committees are being held virtually with no in-person attendance. PRC meetings are open to be viewed by the public, which is why this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube. The Project Review Committee is an advisory committee that reviews major site plans and issues a recommendation to the manager of zoning. PRC is made up of a number of city staff members, as well as 3 urban design specialists from the community. The meeting is pretty informal and consists of 2 parts. We'll have the applicant present the project and we'll do a Q&A with the committee. And then the board will deliberate and provide a recommendation to the manager. So I want to start with introductions, and I will call everyone out to introduce yourselves. So I'm Tom Kisior. I'm in the zoning office and I'm staff to this board. And we'll start with Holly.
Yes, my name is Holly Barrett. I'm the city engineer.
Thanks, Holly. Dave?
Dave Panetti, architect with SWBR here in Rochester.
Roger? Thought I saw Roger on here. Okay, we'll skip Roger. He's probably coming back in. Moving to Sabrina.
My name is Sabrina Boykin. I'm with the city's Architectural Services Department.
Thanks. Donna?
I'm Donna Clements. I'm the DES liaison from Street Design.
Doreen?
Doreen Kirkmeyer, manager of planning.
Chris?
Chris Snyder with the zoning office, liaison for the manager of zoning.
Jim?
Jimmy Arrington, Director of Planning and Design at RIT.
Matt P?
Matt Vanderwall, representative for.
Thanks, and we'll have our applicants introduce themselves as well, starting with Matt.
Good evening, Matt Lester. I'm with Winton Blossom Partners. I'm one of the members, acting as developer.
Thanks, Matt. Evan?
I'm Evan Gaffel, landscape architect with Costage Engineering.
Thanks, and Jay?
Hey, Tom, you've got Jay Johnson and Dean Schultz with Excel Engineering, the architectural and engineering firm for the 3 building shells.
Thanks. So we'll just have you give us a kind of overview of the project. I have all the drawings that I can pull up, whichever drawing you like, and then we'll just jump into kind of a Q&A.
Thanks, Tom. Again, thanks everybody for your time and appreciate the opportunity to present to the review committee. What we've been working on here at the Winton Blossom location is a mixed use development, and what we've been working on this for about a year to line up the appropriate tenant mix. The project has shifted directions multiple times through our internal planning stage in various shapes and forms, as far as, you know, multiple stories, multiple buildings, multiple users. Through COVID, we've experienced, as I'm sure many projects have, some challenges with users. We've been able to navigate through that well, and we're in a position to move forward with commitments that will allow us to do a project should we, you know, be successful with the approvals. What that looks like today, what that will be, is what you see on the screen. The three buildings, which we're looking to phase develop in 2 stages. Our first stage would be roughly 5,515 square feet, 2 freestanding buildings on the Blossom corner and the Winton Road corner nearest the existing Tops fuel station. This project will require variances based on what we've reviewed with Tom and the team. We could get into that a little bit further. I'll kick that over to Evan and Jay as far as the variances that will be requested. So that'll be phase 1, and phase 2 will be roughly 15,000 square feet, 2-story multi-use, mixed-use building. Actually, excuse me, roughly 16,000 square feet. Everything we intended everything to be pushed up to the road the best we could to reflect streetscape, pedestrian friendly, parking in the back. We could accommodate 77 spaces. That's based on our need. We have some retail, some medical, and we anticipate some office. The office portion of this project, office retail, will be the phase 2. And the reason for that is in large part due to the economy, the market, as it's been impacted through COVID, and just the market demand and the tenants we had have paused. We are in a position to move forward immediately on phase 1. Phase 1 will be the 2 buildings I referenced, building A and B, as it's shown on the plan, and 100% of the site work, all of the parking, all of the paving, all of the lighting, all of the landscaping. The only portion of phase 2, which we hope come as soon as possible, but later, will be the building and the footprint of building C, just to go vertical and perform at that time. From here, I'll kick it over to Evan Gaffel from Costage. He could talk a little bit more about the site design and also some of the variances that we'll be requesting or in need of. And then we could kick it over to Jay Johnson. I'm not sure if there's another slide that shows some of the architectural elements. We could get to that when we hand it over to Jay. We could talk about how we implemented some of the city code requirements and the transparency and things like that. So Evan, I'll let you kind of take it from here. And again, I appreciate everyone's time today.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. As Matt said, he did a brief overview of the buildings that are proposed. Have been in front of the PRC multiple times on this project. So, we're trying to incorporate the best site design per previous comments. So I'm just going to do a quick overview. We really situated the 2, let's say, main buildings on Winton, up to the sidewalk. We're not utilizing the existing curb cut that is currently there. Previously, we were trying to design around that. It has been brought out that, per our traffic study, that it is best located shifting that north, just allow for better queuing up at the intersection to the south. So that really helps, the ability to put the buildings up front, and then, all the parking is really contained internally behind the buildings for the most part. And then, with the having the introduction to a drive-through and a need for it, it best fits the site on Blossom, and it's kind of tucked back there. And that's the same concept, kind of off. This one will require variance for setback because we need the drive in the front. But we are proposing pedestrian connections. I believe the building will also have a walk-up pedestrian window for orders and takeout. So with that, we've designed it with pedestrian access from both North Winton and Blossom. Some minor, or not minor, but amenities within the site. We have multiple locations of bike racks. The landscape's been designed to, complement the buildings along Winton. and Blossom, and, pretty extensive landscaping internally just to, add some green back and kind of enhance that area. So again, the biggest variance is that Tom has shared with us. We need the use variance for the drive-through. There's a building setback and a couple building size variances that we'll be requesting. I think, that's kind of the overview of how we laid out the site, and it seems to all be fitting well. So I'm going to turn it over to the building portion now to Jay.
And Evan, just before Jay takes on, just to give a little bit more clarity, the users that we have leases executed with, as you can see, Well Now Urgent Care, and we have a Starbucks coffee shop. Those are executed leases pending, the advancement of the project. And then the building C, the phase 2, is that we don't have leases for that building. And we went through our due diligence items. We've checked off our traffic study, environmental, phase 1. We've gone through, obviously, our surveyor. We're working through utilities now. We appreciate all the comments that Tom's shared with us, and we'll continue to fulfill all of the requests that have been asked. But that's kind of where we are with the project to date.
Yep, and we've included and submitted, full engineer's report, full SWIP for the site.
Thanks. So do we want to talk about how the buildings were designed next then?
Sure. Yeah, we'll kick it over to Jay. Jay's joining us from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. So it's a little colder his side of the world.
Not much different than you, but
North.
I guess building design, we'll start with I guess what we're calling building A, which is the Starbucks building. Could you bring that one up, Tom? I guess trying to follow an order of your paperwork that we discussed the variances on. So this building, as we stated, would need a variance for the drive-through. We also need a setback variance. We provided I know one of the questions we had was, Tom, you were asking about the floor plan. We got you a floor plan. It's listed as having, where the front door and the public entrance is. So I think that's defined. This would be the drive-through that you're showing, and then there's a public entrance on the end and on the side.
So this is Blossom, right? And then this is facing Winton, but within the site?
Correct. If you scroll down a little bit more, Tom, so we can see the bottom elevation. So this bottom elevation would be the one facing into the site. The drive-through is facing the adjacent neighboring property.
The one thing to note, there's an inconsistency with the elevation and the signage, and we didn't plan on getting into signage, but the east elevation would be the preferred elevation for the tenant to have the Starbucks name, because that would be facing the parking lot. And as you see in this rendering, it has just their logo disc. So that was something that would need to be updated. It's shown on the west elevation, the word Starbucks, which will actually be the elevation they would prefer to have their logo disc on. They'd also like to have a sign, their name, Starbucks, on the south elevation facing Blossom Road, just for clarifications on the review. Go ahead, Jay. Sorry about that.
Sure, no problem. No problem. One other item that we'd have to ask for variance on would be the amount of transparency. We're at about 53% based on the 2 foot to 10 foot height. And then the last one here would be building materials. This is a combination of fiber cement board material and composite metal. I know there's a maximum on the facade of 30% and we're above 50% on each side. So that would be another variance needed to be requested. And then these finishes are in line with Starbucks corporate also, what they've requested on the building. There's been a lot of back and forth with them. As Evan alluded to, there will be a walk-up window. We're assuming it's on the street, street frontage side. We don't know for sure where that walk-up window is because they did not have it defined on their plan as of yet, but they will have a walk-up window.
We're gonna need that very quickly. Because we kind of have to finalize all this stuff before we move too much further.
In the walk-up window, Tom, the reason why it's new for Starbucks, it's a concept that they're trying to appeal toward pedestrian environments. So we've encouraged them to implement that in this neighborhood. We feel it would be a welcomed addition. They typically don't have walk-up windows on their corporate stores and as well, in the suburban markets. So that would be something that we're trying to, reflect as the pedestrian need is provided here. So go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
Sure. And then Tom, if you want to go to the Well Now building now.
Could we talk a little bit more about this one building since you have it up?
Sure.
I just wanted to see the floor plan and how it relates to the elevations.
I don't think we have a final floor plan.
Well, there is a floor plan on A13. It may not be final, like you say, but it is a floor plan. Shows the doors, entry points.
Jay, did we email over the floor plan that Starbucks provided us that showed the layout of the interior?
Yeah, and we have that too.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry about that.
Well, I think we did. I'm just.
We have a floor plan of the exterior walls. I don't think we have anything about what's going on inside.
Yeah, what is that other floor plan that's shown below the floor plan? That's interesting.
Yeah, Tom, there's another document below this one.
Oh, this is Well Now.
Well Now.
That's fine.
Okay.
Got it. I was confused.
Evan, are you able to email Tom the floor plan for
The floor
Starbucks?
plan?
Yeah, we got it from Sarah from their design team last week. Tom, I apologize that didn't make its way over you.
Yeah,
that's
Tom,
okay.
I'll send that over right now.
If there's an opportunity to pull that up, just
Sure. Did you guys want to comment on the elevations while I'm pulling that up?
sure. Or yeah, feel free.
I was also trying to get Roger back in the meeting. He hasn't made it yet.
So if we're talking about, if we're answering questions on this building, I was wondering if you could repeat that transparency discussion. Did you say you're not meeting the transparency requirements of the code?
We are not. We're at about 53% in lieu of the 70.
And why what's keeping you from meeting the requirement?
The size of the building's a constraining factor. It's a 2,000 square foot building, and there's an area in the back for their kitchen and food that would be. I'm not sure if it would make sense to have windows in that area, but the design didn't allow for that. We could certainly add windows, but it would be a window to a cooler wall on the interior of that wall.
So I'm sorry. Yeah. So the floor plans will help explain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
Okay.
sorry about that. I'm trying
No,
to,
that's okay.
visuals are my friend. So,
And realistically, Matt, there's, as you remember, that's where Sarah was talking. We don't have you'll see on the floor plan that that's actually part of their dining. If you'll see, that's actually part of the dining area where they have boothettes. The problem is with the walk-up window, they'll be extending the order line counter that actually Tom's cursor is over the top of right now. That will be extending to the outside wall. That's why you see a section of solid wall there, because they'll need the to be able to have the prep area and the items to be able to hand deliver to the walk-up window. So there will be equipment along that wall, is why there is no windows on that corner.
this gives you a good example of what's going on inside. It'll help explain why the windows are located where they are and why they're not in certain walls.
So where's the walk-up window?
Right up, back your cursor, go back, I guess, where you were, Tom, somewhere right in this front corner area will be right off the patio. Nope, towards right south of the door. If you move your cursor down about 5 feet, going down somewhere in that area is where it will be, where we have the just beyond the solid wall section that we have, because their counter will extend out to the exterior wall so they can service that window. And then there'll be a pass through in the storefront. Like I said, it's a new concept for them, so they're still working through design options on that.
So currently this plan doesn't reflect the final.
The walk-up, correct. You are correct.
And the organization of the patio is going to be different because of that as well. Okay.
Correct. Like I said, it's a new concept for them, so they're just working through that, and unfortunately, we don't have more information on that yet. But I think it will really, fit the pedestrian access, pedestrian feel that's required.
Yeah, I really appreciate that this is being considered a walk-up window. I mean, I think that's really, in keeping with our, emphasis on multimodal access to our businesses. The only thing is that have you looked at, I'm sure you have, but have you looked at different site configurations where people don't have to cross, a driveway to get there? I don't know, if the drive-through driveway can go straight, or, I guess I don't know what the options are. It's hard because we're not looking at the whole plan in front of me. So I just wonder if there's other configurations for the vehicle circulation so that there's direct access for pedestrians, so they don't have to cross over a street or a driveway.
Yeah, I think we were trying to minimize the access points to Blossom for vehicular access, utilizing one curb cut instead of two. Maybe there's something we can do with, luckily it's low speeds at that pedestrian crossing, and maybe
it's a similar layout to what you'll find at the Tim Hortons in Bushnell's Basin. They have a crosswalk into their rocking chair patio area, if anyone's familiar with that. It invites pedestrians to walk up to the patio and porch area, and there's enough of a sight line for the car that comes from the window to the crosswalk, where it's a safe environment to cross. But that was the the example that might make the most sense to reference is the Bushnell's Basin, Tim Hortons. It's almost identical of a layout from a drive-through.
Here's a question to the folks on the call as well as the applicants. Would a speed table at that crossing do anything to improve the situation?
I hate to sound not well versed. I don't know. Is a speed table more of a?
It's like a larger bump.
Sure.
So, a ramp up and then there's a flat elevated part, several inches for the walkway, basically top a curb and then a ramp down again. I'm just thinking, I see why you did what you did, but as the cars are coming around, although they have theoretically a decent view, it is pretty congested, traffic on Blossom, cars coming in and out, people walking, it could be visually confusing if you are slowing down for a speed table like that. I think it would improve safety, but I'm interested in what the other folks.
I'm sorry, where are you proposing there be a speed table?
Right at the
At the
pedestrian
crosswalk?
crossing there, Donna.
I don't know, as if they don't, I'm a hardcore Starbucks kind of gal. When you're coming out of the drive-through, the cars are not pushing through there all that quickly. So,
You mean people are getting the first few sips, Donna?
Yeah.
Well, there's that too. But, just, the way they, even, Starbucks is pretty quick, and they are, in fact, fun fact, they are timed for how long you're in line for the drive-through. But I don't think there would be that many cars where, somebody would leave and then there would be a need for a raised crosswalk. And a lot of the times, I just don't, I don't know as if that's necessarily a safety concern, that's just me personally.
Yeah, there's radii there too. You're coming around on radius and you're turning it into another radius. So I don't disagree. I don't think you really can't develop a lot of speed, frankly, through. You may not be watching. That's a whole other thing.
Well, that's true.
There's a distraction that, that's happening there.
Would it be any better if you left the sidewalk here and crossed?
No, I think that would be worse.
Yeah.
I guess behind my comment, it isn't necessarily the exact tool that one employs, but the balance of pedestrians and roads and cars and all that, we're all attuned to that. We talk about that a lot, but I think we've all been in environments where theoretically there's a pedestrian accommodation, but it doesn't feel that way. And you feel like you're taking your life in your hands walking around. Working in Henrietta, I can think of that.
Oh, that's true.
So I think, however, the balance is achieved. I mean, I know where I'm sitting right now in the village of Scottsville, there's some very plain pedestrian crosswalk signs, associated with schools and just associated with crossings sometimes that remind traffic that pedestrians may cross there. So that's all I'm asking people.
I think from my perspective, when you're crossing a street, it's different than when you're just crossing, an exit from a drive-through window. You could certainly, if we were concerned about safety, we could certainly, put in a raised crosswalk, or if you really want to slow them down, put the bump before the crosswalk. And I guess, but me personally, I'm just not overly concerned, but.
Just as an aside, Starbucks has had challenges with speed bumps in their drive-throughs. It's a customer complaint with spilled coffee.
There you go.
I've done over 50 Starbucks locations, and that's why they tend to, put signage, on the ground rather than raise it or change the road pitch. That's why the stopper is a common request, because coffee tends to spill pretty frequently out of the drive-through. But if there is a concern for crossing, I think there may be a good place to put a sign where the patio fence arrow is pointed on this visual, like just as they finish their transaction, the first 5 feet when they look up to before the turn, maybe in the lawn area, the green space, just to yield ahead. I don't know what the appropriate sign might be, but I'm sure
What is Starbucks done in other locations?
they do like ribbed pavement, if that makes any sense.
Right.
But it's really just more green. They'll do like their new thing is the green signage on the ground that has a yield sign and a pedestrian logo on it. It's basically a crosswalk sign, but they'll stamp it on the concrete or the paved asphalt in their drive-through lane. And then of course, you know, they'll stripe the crosswalk where it's required. But to your point, usually the acceleration out of a drive-through window is less than 3 miles an hour. I mean, you're not really gaining speed.
Could we go further north to the point where the sidewalk Y's off a little bit to the west and look at that area on the plan?
I also have a question about the building finishes when we're done with that question.
Keep going.
How far up do you want me to go?
Keep going right to that Y point, Tom. There we are.
Oh, yeah.
So if I wanted to go to the professional building, I guess the assumption is that I Y off to the west. I do another pedestrian crossing over the people queuing for their coffee. I hang a hard right to the east, cross again, and come to the building. And then the sidewalk next to the professional building headed south terminates at the parking area. As a pedestrian, I would not do that.
No.
I would start jaywalking across the parking spaces, and the SUVs, of course, are towering over me, the expeditions or whatever. I pop out, I get killed, and my air is all inherent insurance money.
So you're saying maybe.
I'm having a hard time follow the route.
So I'm wondering, right where the Y off to the west occurs, if a sidewalk could just head 90 degrees east and connect with that sidewalk on the professional building side with another pedestrian crossing there. Yes, I know it's a crossing, but I think any traffic that cut in from Blossom and was going to cut internal to the side over would be much more likely to follow the sidewalk and get to the building if there was that little bit of extra walk and crossing there. How do other people feel about that?
I agree with that, James. I think that in the same thought that you have, that I would probably just cross here at that location no matter what, just because, there's where the sidewalk continues on the other side. So it makes sense to put a pedestrian crossing there.
Would that be in addition to the one that goes kind of through the elbow of the drive-through, or in replacing that to encourage the pedestrians to walk across and then essentially back and avoid the trash drive-through area?
That's a good question. Chris, what do you think? I'm not sure that we would need both if we had one a little further south that connected those walks.
I'd prefer to steer people away from the drive-through and the trash enclosure if we're going to provide them a better route, and not even offer them that.
I think that would be a better location.
I mean, I guess when building phase 2 is up and the parking spaces to the west are serving that, and you're building them first, you're just going to shoot across that parking lot to the building sidewalk and go in.
Across, yeah, you're definitely. I like what you're suggesting, because I think once we do have offices and mixed use in the 2-story building, they'll definitely come down that sidewalk and want to cross the road where you're suggesting there'll be another cross.
I shouldn't say anything as a dutiful and compliant RIT employee. However, when I get my beady eyes on the door of phase 2, I'm heading right for it. I'm not going south to get the sidewalk and then cross where I'm supposed to. So, so I think it's 1 for 1 more or less, if the other professionals on the call agree.
And Holly, you had something you wanted to talk about?
I did. I was just curious. This is more my personal taste than anything. The colors and materials for the Starbucks building itself appear to be gray and maybe a sort of a grayish tan. Being a lifetime Rochesterian, I have to ask if there are other color palettes and warmer materials that might be an option here.
Here, here.
We have flexibility. I mean, I agree with you. Holly, as a building owner, I want to see the nicest building possible. This was really the spearhead of the design came from Seattle, and they tried to work with some of the neighborhood committees, neighborhood associations direction. So some of this they would prefer to improve upon, color palette specifically, and then trying to replicate what you see in the intersection, I think was where we struggled. We were getting some direction from neighborhood associations that the colors should be similar to the intersection colors. The other businesses at the northeast corner or the southeast corner. We would love to make this pop a little bit more and show it off. The materials were really designed and driven by Starbucks. That was, they have prototypical, looks, design, materials, elements, that they do in each respective market. The color we had some latitude on. So I ask of the board, if there's any, direction or opinion, we have that flexibility. We'd love to do a more identifiable color.
Can I expand that question to the other? So the two-story building is designed, I think, to match this building. So can we expand the conversation to the design of both of those buildings?
Sure. We have less flexibility, at least from a landlord, working with a tenant. Well, the Well Now Urgent Care folks are very, this is the brand they worked very hard to build, and they've done a lot of, elevation changes and material changes, brick and some ephes and canopies and stone at the base. And I mean, they've been very uncomfortable to really change their color scheme, as you see. But we have a lot more latitude with the two-story building. And I think we did talk to the neighbors and the associations, and we're very comfortable to do some more brick facing Winton on that elevation. Maybe make it look more like the historical, timeless buildings across the street.
Well, I'm just whirling around the intersection here on Google looking at colors, and they're greens and creams and buff colored brick and some terracotta paint or stucco on an historic building, and pretty warm colors on some of the storm. So I think just a warmer palette than the grays.
More tans, earth tones, or
tans, earth tones, green.
Yeah.
Things like that. And, you can look at that block of stores right across. There's, Mayor's is quite dark, but there's a green, medium to light green, and there's a kind of a, I don't know, middle colored tan yellow. So nothing particularly gray.
Yeah, we'd be happy to update that color scheme. If the materials are more difficult to have a commitment by the tenant, but if it's colors, that's something we can do.
Yeah, I would very much second that. There's just so many colors out there besides gray and black. We haven't seen the sun here in months, as you know, so I'd like to see some different options. I mean, if we could have that luxury, it'd be cool to see a couple different scenarios.
Yeah, I think we could definitely provide some options, and let us know what the best path forward with that is. If it's just a more of a administrative discussion, or if it's something that needs to be formally presented in a different way.
And can we discuss style too? So the neighborhood, and I think PRC had always kind of asked for something to blends in with the buildings across the street. So can everybody comment on that, or maybe ask questions about that? I'm going to bring them up.
My discussion with the neighbors was more specific to the elevation facing Winton, and they were interested to see kind of the parapet. If you look at the mayor's and the Allstate building, how it's square with a little bump up, and maybe that, I don't know what the word is, that little awning or roof line above the windows below the top of the building, something like that we could reflect and mirror as our 2-story building faces Winton, to frame it similarly. The gooseneck lights have been a challenge from a maintenance standpoint. We would prefer to use sconce lighting, and one of the neighbors on the neighborhood association was supportive of that. We have used, from a lighting standpoint, we could get into lighting details and specs. I don't know if this is the right place for that, but sconce lighting that's lit up and down. From a signage standpoint, we like to use internally illuminated halo lights, which we've worked with the Village of Fairport, and that's something that we've built in that village. Something similar would be what we envision here. But yeah, I think we could adopt a look that is similar to what you see on the screen and use more brick facing Winton. The hope is that the other 3 sides of the building could be a different material, just from a feasibility of the project standpoint. 4-sided brick would be a challenge to make work economically, but we are comfortable to provide that on the Winton Road facade.
I'm thinking that, when you look at the view on the right, the pretty heavy and contrasting color sign band that goes all the way around, and then the pretty heavy and dark entablature up at the parapet, that's different. I mean, it's not bad to be different, right? The Guggenheim Museum and Fifth Avenue is different, and it's cool. But it's different from the stores across the street, and I think it actually makes the building look lower, as if the parapet's kind of crushing it. So if there was more a sense of one material that just swept up both stories, and you're talking about maybe brick on the primary facade and, IFAS or something, whatever, on the other facades. If it went up to the parapet instead of making those very heavy bands, I think it would look simpler and look better, and if the sign band, maybe the signs just float where you need them, like on the traditional building, or if you wanted a band, if it was a color that just matched the field color. Again, I think it would make the building look a little elegant and more tall. Again, I'm interested in what all the other members think.
Jim, just to make sure I know which building you're talking about, I think you're talking about the office building, right?
I am. Yeah, I'm not talking about the healthcare building. I started with the office building. Start big.
So, Dave, were you going to say more than that? I'll let you go, and then I can go after.
I was going to go down a different pathway, so let's stay with where Jim was.
Okay. So, I don't have a lot of concerns about the design of the larger office building, other than its asymmetry, where the buildings across the street have a symmetry to them, and they're sort of centralized in terms of fenestration, like the window orientation. This building kind of is askew, And I didn't know what that choice was necessarily, but I'm not too concerned with that. I think that this building fits in and coordinates with other buildings on the site, like Starbucks, but not the Well Now building. And I guess I was just wondering what sort of flexibility you have with Well Now, if there is any, in terms of making it something that's a little bit more uniform with the buildings that you've already designed and coordinated on the site.
Well, Chris, before we jump to the Well Now building, I just wanted to reinforce what Jim said. I agreed with Jim's comments. I think the heavy banding make the building look a lot more horizontal than it needs to be. And I think Jim made some really good comments for that building.
Yeah, what I was going to go, the pathway I was going to go down was somewhat related to the comment a minute ago, but it was really had more to do with 19th and early 20th century buildings, which generally, possibly other than Frank Lloyd Wright himself, would never erode the corner. They would always have a full masonry corner, and you'll find across the street and in that area that corner windows are very atypical. And so it's taking that building and kind of creating an odd, kind of thrust or push to the side, which I don't think in this particular context, because the site isn't doing anything to particularly enhance that aspect of it. And it's not really allowing you to see it in a 360-degree visibility sort of methodology. I don't think there's any benefit to having a corner window. As I look at the elevation, the rendering on the right, that far right corner is a solid corner. And on the smaller one to the left next to the well building, that corner is a full corner. That would be very much more typical of 19th century and early 20th century buildings before they began to really have larger expanses of glass. And so I don't particularly get it. And I think it's maybe adding to the horizontality. If I had something that was vertical there in the corner and kind of closed the corner, so to speak, I think you get more verticality, and you could then reduce that band at the top somewhat and make it less prominent.
Does the office building meet the transparency requirement? And I guess follow-up question, does the healthcare building meet the transparency?
I don't know, none of the building, I don't think any of the buildings meet it.
You're correct. None of them do meet it. The office building is at 59, just shy of 60%, and the Well Now urgent care is at 50. Hang on one second. Let me just get to that one. That one's at 57%.
Can you comment on the spandrel? And I wasn't sure if you were, so spandrel wouldn't count for transparency. I don't know if you included that in your calculation or not. And then talk about where that is located on the building.
We did not include the spandrel in the transparency. The reason for the spandrel glazing, though, would be certain areas that they have within there has being in urgent care, have confidentiality areas and things where they don't want people looking in, but they would like the look of windows being there just to soften the facade. So they can also do the same thing with shades on the interior. It's just the shades never open.
Yeah, that'd be better. Tom, on the percentage glazing, I'm all for the design guidelines. I wouldn't ever speak against them. I'm also, though, supportive of precedent in a district. If you went across, so to speak, across the street on Winton and did an analysis of the percentage, I think you'd find it was quite a bit less. I'm all about trying to be in conformity with my neighbors. And if Mayor Hardware was a representative example or Allstate or something like that, might we look at what their percentages are and maybe be more in line with that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We can include that in the site plan findings. They would still need a variance, but it would be a, helpful justification.
No, I get that, but you got to understand that the design guidelines, at least as they were put together years ago, are seeking to, have a lot of transparency. And that's a very, very good thing. But then you got to really look at the context in the district that you're working within, and it may need a variance, but at least there's a good reason for the variance because it really works with its contextual relationships.
Yeah, I was actually kind of leaning towards that when I was asking. I guess the direction in my mind that I was taking it is that clearly the Well Now building is the least flexible from a design standpoint. So how can we make the other buildings make it fit in as much as possible? What can be done so that the Well Now building isn't the only one that doesn't match with everything else?
Yeah, I guess that's a question. Do you want everything to match that, or do you want it to still try and match the existing buildings in the neighborhood? I don't know.
I don't think we want
That's the
everything to
question.
match Well Now. It's, it's hyper articulated. I mean, there are buildings that are dull, and then this one is making up for a bunch of them because it's hyper articulated, the stone and the ins and outs and the poppy parapet and the jazzy multiple canopies. It's wow. You don't need Starbucks. You shouldn't have.
I was kind of hoping that, yeah, you shouldn't have given. I was kind of hoping we could do something with the other building that would kind of tone that Well Now building down a little. It's a bit much. It's very reminiscent of the CVS, and I get it with branding and stuff. But if there's a way to somehow, and I don't know how, if we could use the surrounding adjacent structures to make that a little more palatable, that'd be awesome.
We recently completed a Well Now over on Lyle Avenue across from Wegmans in the town of Gates. And I know Jay does the architecture, and it has a very different impact in real life versus the rendering. We got one built in Canandaigua that just opened, and that board, Rick Brown said the same thing. Wow, your rendering does not do it justice. The real thing is so much nicer.
Where's the one in Canandaigua?
Right on Eastern Boulevard, across from
right on 5 and 20 there.
Yep, right next to Chipotle. We have a Chipotle in a Well Now.
It's in a strip mall though.
It's a freestanding building. Yeah, the Well Now is freestanding. It's next to Bed Bath and Beyond, that strip center.
I'm familiar with the area. I guess that's kind of the point, is that it kind of fits in the suburban context as opposed to, an existing urban environment.
Yeah, my point was just the rendering.
It's not as bad.
Doesn't do it justice.
Okay.
Versus seeing it.
Fair enough.
My mind is kind of going towards the Walgreens on Monroe. I don't know if you guys know. I'm kind of questioning in my mind on that corner on Monroe Ave where the Walgreens is, and across the street is that historic bank building. Does that fit kind of what we'd be looking for from a design guideline standpoint, or does it stand out because it's its own distinct?
Monroe Avenue, like Pittsburgh Plaza?
Monroe? No, downtown.
Oh, okay. Trying to think where the Walgreens is. The Rite Aid? Is it now Walgreens?
Yeah, it used to be a Rite Aid.
I'm sorry. The Rinaldi's property, yeah. Alexander, I think, or what is it? Portland or Goodman and
yep,
across from the Chase.
I'm just doing a little net searching, and the well now in Geneva, New York, it's clearly of the family, but it's just a little simpler. It's, instead of gotten multiple parapet pop-up, pop-downs, which of course cost money to create, it's got a level parapet with brackets, and then it pops up once. So I don't know, it seems to me that maybe simplifying it a bit would help it be more contextual.
Jay, do you think that there'd be a reasonable reception from the Well Now group if we modified some of the articulation? And I'm trying to sound like an architect. So.
Typically not, Matt. I mean, a lot of those were those original MASH locations and other locations that they bought as far as their first vested package to start, that they're kind of stuck with the locations and have kind of modified them slightly just to get close. But that's, as you know, that's not their preferred portfolio anymore.
And I don't know when they built the Well Now in Geneva, but if you go on Google and take a look, it's pretty decent. Now, the one that pops up for Amherst, New York is more hyper-articulated, and I think actually less attractive than the one in Geneva.
Geneva was actually a multi-tenanted building with a Metro mattress and an AT&T and a bubble tea. That was one that just was.
They took a storefront of an existing location.
Yeah, that was an existing strip center.
I think we have to remember too that the city has requirements, zoning code requirements, and it's not really up to the city to match what the applicant and the group wants. You're supposed to blend in with what we've established in the code, unless you can't. So it's not, just saying they don't want to change the design is it's not going to be a good justification for the zoning board.
Well, and that kind of goes back to my original question was, is there any flexibility, and what would they be flexible on? Or do they utilize the same exact model, excuse me, in all of their new construction? I guess just to understand that, like what could be changed, if anything.
I'll be honest, I'll let Matt speak a little bit too. He knows them well. I would say out of 9 out of 10 of the most recent ones we have done have all been in line with this. The only ones that haven't, if they're going into existing centers that have had, a pre-existing facade. They've been trying to really push for their standardized look throughout the area. Obviously, that's run all the way from Auburn North, I guess, Auburn, New York North. They've kind of been trying to establish that as their trade dress or look, which does mimic some of their other items that they have in their portfolio. We can always go back to them and ask if they are willing to have any flexibility in any areas and see what they're.
Are those urban sites or are those suburban sites or a mix or what?
Mix. There's a mix. So just to feed off Jay's point. So I've personally done 30 Well Nows in the last 2.5 years, and the typical Well Now first, the presentation does not include. I think I guess 3 is a light, but the brick on the columns from the base stone to the, I don't know what you want to call that, the facade, that is usually matching the facade in those columns. So this is a little bit, we tried to, whether it's perceived that way or not, we tried to be a little bit more inclusive of brick due to the comments of the neighbors. The neighborhood associations wanted to see some brick, and that's what we added to this rendering. It's a more expensive build, but we thought the materials would be looked upon favorably. So that typically is not what we've done. It'll be ephes all the way on the columns down to the stone. This one has a little bit of a nicer look. In certain cases, everything else out of those 30J are basically the same, from the canopy or from the awnings to the coping to the lines in the sign band to the stone.
So I just, Tom, what specifically do they need the variances for with respect to the facade design?
I
For
have it
transparency
here.
was the big one.
This building too has the one for the area.
Yep.
It's allowed at 3,000 and it's 3,500.
I had it up. I was trying to get Roger back in. Off the top of my head, and then I'll pull it up. Transparency for the windows, size of the building. It's over 3,000 square feet.
Okay.
The height is okay. EFS is okay up higher up. The door, I think Matt has confirmed that this is going to be a front door on Northwind. And can you talk a little bit about that on those three buildings while I'm pulling the code review up?
Yeah. Jay, do you have the interior floor plan for this location?
Tom had it.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Yep, yeah, I do.
Typically there's two doors, the front and the back, and there's, obviously ambulance takeaways on the back, but this one, I would expect the front door to be on Winton, which is why we put this sidewalk around the building. Similar layout to how you would enter Mayor's Hardware from the parking area, and then also have a door from the sidewalk. So yeah, that'll give you a good understanding of how the layout is. The waiting room, I believe, is fronting, which is on the left side of the screen. I believe that's fronting Winton Road. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a north, south, east, west?
I don't think there is on here, Matt. This one's very conceptual from them right now. If there's any direction on there right now.
Jay, would you feel that would be how they would lay out, with the waiting room fronting facing Winton, and then the ambulance stall in the parking area?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, we'd have to get that clarification from ops. As you can see from the layout, you can come in either side is accessible. We just have to get their feedback.
And I have the code review. Those are the three. So maximum square footage, not meeting 70% transparency, and then the spandrel is another one. Glass is supposed to be clear or lightly tinted. So those are the three for this building. So how does everyone feel? Are there more comments? Can we start moving towards recommendations? What does everyone think?
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate that Well Now wants to go and, have a location here, and I think it's great. But I agree that it's a suburban design, and it doesn't really work here. It's really something that I personally would appreciate if they would, rethink that, and get a more of an urban design on that. And maybe the fact that it's over the square footage, it does bring in the fact that to mitigate that, the fact that it's too large a building for the district, that you mitigate that through the design, and maybe that's where you pull in the design discussion. And we've had buildings that are part of a chain. They've modified their design in the city before in order to get certain approvals that they're required. So it wouldn't be unusual. I think the parapet wall is a little funky and looks a little inauthentic for an urban application for a building. So I think it would be great if there was a, a little different roof line on this. And frankly, well, now people are going there because they need to go there. They're not going there because, they recognize the building and signage and the awnings and so forth. They're going to be clear, getting people to the building. They don't need to look at a roof line that looks like every other building that's in the Well Now chain. So I really like to see that reevaluated as part of the application process, or the approval process.
I was just looking online, and they appear to be headquartered in Chicago. And there are two Chicago suburban locations that I found. They're, not dissimilar from this, but the walls are primarily brick. So if you just look at this rendering and simplify that above the base to one, warm brick color, that alone, I think, kind of calms it down and makes it more contextual, like buildings nearby. And if the parapet could be simplified to not having 3 heights of parapet, but even just 2, I just think those 2 things alone would really help it become more contextual.
I think we'll be able to get them comfortable with, and Jake is their in-house architect as well, but if we could get the parapet height equal to the column to keep one consistent height, it may, to your point, James, simplify. There's a lot going on. I don't disagree. That may help. We're gonna be challenged to get them to deviate too much from this design. We're building this design, if you're familiar with the city of Buffalo, in the Elmwood neighborhood district. It's very similar to Park Ave, if you could create a comparison.
Yep.
That's this design you see here is what we are under construction with now. Also in Amherst, which is actually in the city of Buffalo, in the border of the town of Amherst. Amherst is similar to, Penfield, Fairport, Pittsburgh. We built this exact design. So we have done this in more urban settings. And again, I really encourage, if you have an opportunity to see one of these in person, the rendering doesn't do the same justice. If you could see it in the evening hours when it's lit up, it does have a softer tone, and it's a nice looking building. But I do agree with the comments that have been made, and I'll ask Jay if he feels there's an opportunity to raise the columns to keep one consistent height. I think that would do a lot for making it a little bit more easier on the eyes, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, just my 2 cents, Matt. I think the items you noted about the buildings across the street are exactly that. So the ones across the street actually do have a higher parapet across the middle of the building. Not that different from Well Now. And I think if this building mirrored that a little bit closer, it wouldn't be as big of a deal at all.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I think we could probably, work together with them and not to change their brand. They are headquartered in Syracuse in New York. They just opened a second hub office in Chicago. This company is part of Aspen Dental Management, Inc. I've been working with them since 2002. They've grown. They're a great company. They partner with local healthcare facilities. They're partners with Erie Med in Buffalo, St. Joe's in Syracuse, and St. Pete's Hospital Systems in Albany. The doctor who's the president of the company was trained and born in Buffalo. He went to UB, so he's a Buffalo trained doctor. So this is I'm pretty excited. They're a great company. They see how this freestanding building has done well for the brand, and it's been a great community provider. They were the first ones that did the COVID testing in Monroe County throughout the state. and they've done an excellent job with it. So, and they will be, I don't want to give away any secret recipe, but hopefully they'll be vaccinating soon. So,
Okay.
at any rate, it's a great use for the community, and we would love to be able to make this work for them. But I think, Jay, if you feel as though there's an opportunity to modify their brand a little bit, not to detract from their brand, but maybe to accentuate what the corridor exemplifies, maybe there's some tweaks we can make to get everyone comfortable.
So it sounds like we kind of know where we're going with that building. Let's move on to some, the preliminary final thoughts of the other buildings, then we can vote. How about the 2-story building, recommendations regarding that?
Well, I have a question about the site design. While this, the C building is a later phase, what's going to be on that site, on where the building is located?
Yeah, the 2-story building, we have intentions to do 1st floor retail, 2nd floor office.
No. I mean, until that building is constructed, what will be, you're not going to turn it into parking or anything, are you?
No, it'll be seated and maintained lawn. We're hopeful we could do like a, local farm market. I'm getting creative. I don't know if that's even permitted, but the intent is to use that as park space, not to have loiterers.
It's going to be graded and seated. That's my question. I just don't want it to be turned into parking lot.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, all right.
It'll be curbed and you wouldn't be able to get there with a vehicle.
Okay.
The rest of the site will be finished and built out, the curbing, the sidewalks, the ADA compliant. We need to maintain C of O's for the other 2 buildings. So that'll just be seeded and maintained.
Okay.
Hopefully grass grow. I think grass will grow there.
So how about comments on the 2-story design before we get to deliberations?
I'm just going to make a recommendation that that it be graded and seeded and maintained while it's during the first phase.
Not a problem.
There was a comment that came up in site plan review about perception of areas that are seated. If it looks like a park, that perhaps the neighbors would view it as a park, and that it would become hard to actually develop it.
I don't think that's true of privately owned land.
Okay.
So the other thing we will do is if you're comfortable with this, again, stockade fence around the perimeter of where the building footprint will be, to anticipate the future construction.
I don't think I would go for a stockade fence around it. I think it being, Donna, that's only if it's public property that's being used as a park by the community. I don't think that applies to private property. You can't.
Right. Agreed. There was just the perception of green space and how the neighborhood wants green space and park, and the comment came out that whatever you do, don't call it park, because that would lend some hope for something that's not going to happen on a
I like the fact it's going to look like a development site, and it's it could have a for sale sign on the front of it, or whatever available for development. Anything like that, I think is
right. Okay.
Fine. Yeah.
So just Tom, to send a clear message.
We're happy to say future phase 2. Put the rendering of the building on it that we do if we get to an approval.
Sure.
That'll help, and it will be for lease. That the intent is to get tenants to build. So that's an easy accommodation.
So I think to try to summarize what we had said before, for the 2-story building, I think the comments were, again, to try to mirror other buildings in the neighborhood. Be it with symmetry or a parapet that better reflects the historic buildings there. And then to segue from that to the Starbucks, I think the comments were around use of materials and color of materials, as far as matching both each other and neighborhood.
And crosswalk signage and for the Starbucks, and then shifting the northern crosswalk south, right?
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion? Does someone want to make a motion, or what are you feeling? Are people comfortable recommending approval with conditions that we've discussed? What does everyone think?
Are we going to do it? You confuse me.
Well, everything's just blending together. We can shift to deliberations. I feel like we've kind of already got there.
Well, I'm going to come back to this building. I think the open corner it's frivolous. There's no design intent behind it. There's no need for it. It doesn't have anything to do with the district. And I think it's the sort of thing that people do to kind of change the look of a building, but it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the inside, nor anything to do with what's going on the site. So I think it takes away from a 19th, early 20th century character of a traditional post and beam type building when you open it up that corner, when you erode it. I would close it, and I think it would be the right thing to do.
I agree. When I was saying the building's askew, I sort of meant earlier when, without saying as in many words as you did, David, that really the missing vertical portion of that corner would create a building that would probably be much more in line with the context of the neighborhood, just by centering these windows and creating a pattern that's a pattern of windows in the fenestration design that is symmetrical, by then sort of balancing the two sides.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, no, I agree completely.
I like Jim Yarrington's comments too about the horizontal banding and so forth.
Yeah, can you repeat those so I can get some notes?
Yeah.
Exactly the way you said them, Jim.
Word for word. Well, I guess I could just rewind.
So I was suggesting that the intermediate sign band is very heavy, and that it either be eliminated and just floating signs be installed where needed, or it be the same color as the field color of the building, and that the single material of the walls extend up and not have the entablature so heavy, have that go up closer or to the parapet, kind of lighten it up. You got to state that elegantly, Tom. I don't think I did.
I understood it.
Thank you.
How about the rest of the site design? Are people pretty happy with how the buildings have been moved around? And compared to the initial project, I think it's great that we're now lined up on North Winton.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the added pedestrian improvements to sort of make it more like a campus is really great too. And then of course, yeah, pushing those buildings up to the street makes a huge difference. Putting the parking behind, it's sort of exactly the kinds of things that we want to see.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And even the drive up queuing being internal to the site is very helpful in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other thoughts, or does someone want to make a motion? And I have a big list of conditions, recommendations that we would add based on the most recent conversation.
So I would move approval with conditions noted.
I'll second.
That's a recommendation for approval, right, Tom?
Right. So the three options are recommended denial, recommended approval with recommended conditions. So those conditions are a little stronger. Jill would review those conditions and work with the applicant, and then they might not all be 100% incorporated, but it's stronger than just recommending approval.
Yeah.
You know, we would work with them to make the improvements.
Yeah. So it's a recommendation, a conditional recommendation for approval.
Right, and so I'll run down these quickly. Crosswalk signage, shifting the northern crosswalk south. Building B, we would ask for a little simplified building design, additional brick, and simplifying the parapet. In terms of the site layout in building C, soil and seed, while it's not before it's constructed. Try to adjust the design to better mirror the buildings across the street. Additional symmetry, examples are additional symmetry, parapets could be similar. Removing the open corner, similar pattern of windows, and adjustments to the sign band. Some of these, you know, there's a lot of ideas in there, and we would work with them to try and, you know, make these changes. Any additional recommendations?
Do we have any recommendations with respect to them not meeting the transparency requirements? I know that Dave, you made a comment about across the street, but I was looking across the street and I think they may meet them as originally designed. So
Yeah, that was kind of my point.
That across the street they meet them. I thought you were saying that contextually it's
Personally,
No.
the transparency issue isn't bothering me here.
okay.
Other
Me
things,
neither. I'm not concerned with transparency for this particular context in this situation with the neighborhood.
Tom, did we want to pick up just the comment about the warmer colors that was discussed kind of in general, as opposed to the grays
Right.
and the blacks?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing we missed.
I know it's on here. My note sheet is a little crazy.
Yes,
Would
yes,
you-
please.
Would you be comfortable to choose some color palettes, tans?
Well, it might be interesting just to see, you know, in discussions with your client there,
Sure.
what they would prefer in terms of warmer color palettes and potentially come back with a few options.
Okay.
But
The
you don't-
format that Tom suggests.
Yeah, you don't have to come back to us though. You can work that out with the manager of zoning.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yeah, I've seen Starbucks in, you know, tans and greens in a bunch of locations, almost to the point that that's a branding color.
Right.
I think they would prefer it. I apologize. We were trying to work with the neighbors and reflect some of the other colors, and maybe it detracted from what we were trying to accomplish. So
No worries. It's a journey.
believe me.
Another of the big variances is materials. So both Starbucks and the two-story building are primarily metal. It sounds like we're okay with Starbucks. That's kind of part of their branding. But the other recommendations for the other building might incorporate different materials into that. Is that correct?
I'd heard brick on Winton discussed by Matt, I think.
Yep, we're happy to incorporate more brick in the Winton facade.
Okay. I think we've talked about all of the variances. Unless there's any comments about the drive-through specifically, it seems like everyone's reasonably comfortable with that. I mean, it has to go to the zoning board for a use variance, so it's really up to them, but you can comment on that too if you'd like.
Well, I would prefer not to see a drive-through, but that's really up to the zoning board to decide.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also say in terms of design of a drive-through, just reiterating what was said previously, and I don't remember who said it, but it is internal to the site, and it is, I think it was Jim. I think it was you that said that. It is internal to the site, and it is well designed for it fitting with the overall site plan.
Well, isn't it always internal to the site? I don't understand that.
Well, there's enough queuing. I think some sites, we have a question that the queuing might.
Oh, the queuing.
The queuing,
It has a queuing room. Yeah, it does have an.
Correct. Sorry, I didn't say that. Yeah, the queuing is internal to the site. Of course, it's internal to the site. Yes. Thanks, Doreen.
I didn't know what you meant.
Everyone was probably scratching their heads like, okay, Chris.
I'm sure everybody's been in drive-ups or approaching a building with them where it seems like the queue is completely surrounds the building. You can't get in. You have to go to your car and get in queue.
Okay, so we have a recommendation for approval with recommendations, that long list that I have already mentioned. So let's move to the vote. I'm gonna just call out voting members, and then you can tell us if you approve and agree. First is Holly. You're on mute.
Oh, yes.
Dave?
Yeah, thumbs up with conditions.
Doreen?
Yep, I'm good with that, with the conditions.
Chris?
Yes, with the conditions.
Jim?
Same as the others, yes, with conditions.
And Matt?
Yep.
All right, so the recommendation is approval with our list of recommendations. Thanks everyone for coming. I think this was a really good discussion and an exciting project. I think we're close. Make some tweaks. We'll bring them to the land use boards, and I think it'll be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Journey continues. Thank you.
Yes.